Darren Jones. Welcome to the first Mr. Rock Hill podcast. You're my guinea pig out here. And I wanted to have you on because you are not only a home inspector that I met doing real estate, but also because you supply me with my delicious caffeine every morning at the house. And I want to know about your story. I want to know, how you got into coffee roasting, how you've kind of grown this business out of it, what you've seen, what it's like selling in this area, kind of artisanal roasted coffee. And just tell us about yourself. Are you from this area? I don't even think I know that.
You have to pause if I'm going to answer all those different questions.
I will. We'll get into all that. I'm just
yeah.
All
right. Thanks, Nate. Yes, I am your local caffeine dealer. Got into coffee, 10, 12 years ago, roasting it myself. I was always a bit of a snob, or thought I was. I had to try the new things, go into the coffee shops we shall not name, and get their Antigua or whatever the special of the day was, thinking that, I'm going to try something different. And honestly, I didn't feel like I was getting much different when I would do that. And so I've got a brother-in-law who lives up in Virginia, and he was like, I'm going to start a coffee roasting business. I'm like, you can roast it yourself? How do we do that?
Yeah.
So I got some of the details and just talking to him and went online, and this was when YouTube was still young, but there was stuff out there. And
so how long have you been doing it then? If YouTube's young, that means 2007-ish?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I saw videos of people putting it in pans, people putting it in popcorn poppers.
So you're saying people were roasting coffee like
in a pan on a stove,
like a cast iron pan or like a nonstick pan?
They were using anything they get their hands on because it was like this fad of let's try something unique and different. And I watched several of those and thought, well, for me, I don't want to do it in my kitchen because when you roast coffee, and I should have brought some green beans.
Yeah. I meant to tell you when we were talking yesterday. I was like, I was going to tell you to bring some props, but
they look like maybe you can slip an image in this.
Oh yeah, we can do whatever we want.
Matter of fact, I could probably send you pictures of what
send
we're talking
me some
about.
Yours, yeah.
So the beans come look like little green nuts, like a peanut, and we put them in the roaster, and there's this like skin on them. So I guess we got to back up a hair and say coffee grows on a plant as a fruit. Mm-hmm. And that's where we get the name white blossom, because before we get that fruit, we get the white blossom on that coffee plant. So should I be looking here?
Yeah, look here. Yeah, you can look here. You're talking to me. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these plants grow. They blossom into this white blossom. That blossom dies off. The fruit then starts growing on that. And when it ripens, it turns cherry red. Most of them do. There's other colors, just like other fruits. There's different varieties of coffee. But that's where we got the name White Blossom from. Great coffee starts with the white blossom.
Okay.
So in the meantime, once they harvest that, most of that's harvested by hand, they have to break that fruit down and strip it off that bean. There is a coating on that bean that we call chaff, and when it goes through the roasting process, that chaff comes loose and flies off the bean. That typically gets exhausted out, and
it's kind of like a hull on a wheat or whatever.
Right. So it's not like a shell on a nut. It's more like just a skin, like a hull on wheat, and that comes off in the roasting process. And where was I going with this?
Well, you said you were stepping back because we were talking about the green beans.
Yeah. Chaff. Okay, why I wouldn't roast this on my stove.
Okay.
When that chaff is coming loose, it's coming loose right there on your stove, and you're stirring, and it's making a mess in your kitchen. And I have seen people do this. It's a very messy process. So I thought I got to come up with a way to do this where it's not in my kitchen, where I can take it outside and do it. I could have bought a hot plate or something, but honestly, it was let me just order some beans and use what I've got at home.
Okay.
We have a large stainless steel bowl. I have a heat gun, so like a construction grade heat gun, and I put that on high, and had a wooden spoon, and I'm holding the heat gun with one hand and stirring the beans with the other, applying heat to the beans, and that's how I started roasting coffee. Did that for 4 to 6 months before I thought, it's getting cold outside. I need a better way to do this than stand out
Right.
here in the cold.
Right.
Which also affects the roasting of the coffee because now it's harder to heat them up when it's cold outside, and I'm sitting there with a heat gun trying
Sure.
to transfer heat from the gun to the beans. But I was literally roasting coffee with a heat gun in a stainless bowl with a wooden spoon.
So that's how you started. Was Amazon at that time? Could you like go onto Amazon and be like, I'd like to buy a electric or gas coffee roaster, or were you like, I want to just try this kind of homebrew method?
So I initially started the homebrew method simply because I wasn't sure what I was getting into and if it was something I wanted to commit to.
Okay.
And it was a commitment. I think there's more options today as for your home roaster, and that's not something I would know a lot about because that's not something I'm really into anymore.
Right.
I see more options out there that pass in front of me. Back then, your starting price was like $500. So do I really want to drop $500 on something that I may do today and quit tomorrow?
Right.
So I started with what I had at home. I think I spent $25 on some green beans online.
So yeah, that's been my question. Is I would have never, for some reason in my mind, I would think that the gatekeepers of green coffee were pretty intense, and I just maybe because I never thought about it, but I mean, was there someone in 2007,
Yes.
2009 that had a website that's like
Yes.
buy your
Yes,
green beans?
and most of those people are still there, and there's many more there too.
Okay.
So what happens is we have the big importers. We've got, of course, they're at the ports, California, Florida, Jersey, and they're selling you by the bag. It's a 150-pound bag. So if you wanted to buy 150 pounds of Sumatra,
Right.
it's going to last you a long time.
Right.
Which I'm not interested in. But then you've got the smaller people, the smaller roasters that are buying that 150-pound bag, but they're a smaller boutique roaster, maybe a local roaster here in town. But they don't want to have 150 pounds of Sumatra. Some of these roasters, that might last them a year. And now that's all they're going to sell. Or maybe that lasts
Right.
only 6 months. But they want to have 8 beans that they can use as a variety of beans. So they can order 8, 10, 12 different bags of beans, sell half that off online or somewhere else to someone like me that just wanted to buy a pound of it.
Okay.
So a lot of these smaller roasters would then resell the green beans.
Side business.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
'Cause now they've got more flow of
How long
beans.
does a bean last from when it's harvested? And we can get into all the different dry curing methods or whatever.
Right, but so beans...
when it gets to the port, how long will a green bean last to be roasted?
Well, I mean, that depends on how it's being stored at the
Okay.
port. But
Okay.
so in good condition, if it travels and it stays dry, it doesn't get flooded. When they come off at the port and they're completely moldy, and
Right.
there's companies that still buy them and they will burn them and burn all that mold out of it and then blend it with something else to get rid of it because they can buy it cheap enough that they'll still make money on it. We don't touch that stuff.
Right.
Ever. But in perfect world, it arrives at the port. How long does it last? By the end of a year, or say 9 months in, some coffees will begin to get almost a papery taste. Now, you would have to have a pretty good palate to pick that up, but it does happen. So at 9 to 12 months, you get that papery taste. But keep in mind, this is a crop.
Right.
So when that farm is done for the year, you don't get any more till the next year if you
Right.
want that specific coffee.
It's like around here we have peaches, right? If there's
Exactly.
a bad frost, like might happen this year,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's been 70 degrees and we get a frost. Like, I mean, I remember we had a few years ago, it's probably been 10 years ago, but there was like a giant snow the second week of March. Not so much here, but in the mountains, but it got cold. And it was like,
Yes.
peach farmers came out and were like, look, we're done. All the state of South Carolina peaches are ruined.
Yep.
Sorry, y'all.
Yes, and that does happen, and that drives coffee prices up.
Right.
We just had that last year in Brazil. Weird weather patterns, rain. So Brazil was like, "Oh, we're going to have problems this year." Brazil is the #1 coffee producing country in the world.
Oh, wow.
So when they say we've got weather problems, it's going to affect our coffee crop, all coffee prices go up.
Right.
And so we have experienced that recently. But again, it's a crop. So whether or not they've got a good crop or a bad crop, when they sell that crop, we don't see any more until the next year.
Okay.
unless you go to another region. Because we've got regions all the way around the world where those crops are coming off almost every month of the year. So yes, you can get fresh coffee every month of the year, but not from the same origin.
Okay.
So
Because you got southern, northern hemisphere, western. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
So it's most coffee is grown around the equator, but it's worldwide. So it just depends on what season we are in that part of the world.
Okay.
So that papery coffee, you're not going to get a better coffee than that. If you really love Brazil,
Right.
you're going to really love that papery coffee.
Okay.
But again, it's minimal impact on the taste of the coffee. It's just when you get that fresh crop and you're like, oh yeah, this does taste a little better.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going to go, well, this is gross. I can't drink 9-month-old coffee. You'll never, you're not going to know the difference until that fresh one comes in. You go, this is a little brighter.
Yeah, I never really knew the difference in coffee till I started. You started educating me and selling me your coffee. But I lived in Charleston, and there was a fellow there who had been in California, and he brought like the first pour over single origin spot to Charleston, and he was a friend of mine, and so I'd hang out there, and I didn't really know, I didn't really care, I knew there was some different tastes, like you'd have an Ethiopian, I'd be like, oh, yeah, I can tell the difference, but now that I've learned all this, it's really interesting to see, what a bean from Vietnam, what a bean from wherever, Indonesia, that area versus the kind of traditional Brazilian like stuff. So yeah, it's super cool and it's super fun. And I think what I like about yours is it's like super accessible. Like if you want this, you can go to your website, try some different stuff. It's not going to be like you're ordering from one of the big kind of big independent or big small roasters that are out there now that are like so expensive. I was looking at different coffee from just online, and I'm like, dude, I'm not going to do this when I have you 15 minutes down the road that is roasting the same stuff to the same standards, and you can try a coffee from around the world and not break the bank.
So going back to when I got into this, stainless steel pan, heat gun, why did I commit to that $500 roaster? And I did after just a few months. But I was finding that I'm getting these beans from unique sources around the world. I found some really great suppliers that had some more unique beans. It wasn't just, here's a Guatemala, here's a Colombia, here's a Brazil. It was, hey, we've got one from Myanmar. And it's really good. And it's got these nice licorice and cherry notes in it. And it's like, what? What did you say?
Right.
And so we got to order that. We got to try that. And they were right. And it was like, wow, this is really unique coffee. So that's really what got me hooked. And so I don't just order the same Guatemala Tenango.
Yeah.
If it's not a good coffee, we're not ordering a Guatemala. If it's got to stand out for us to order the coffee. It's got to have some unique aspect to it for us to want it. Now, once we get it, it kind of loses its uniqueness because we're hanging on to it because it's really good.
Right.
Unless that farm sells out and we have to move to another farm. But again, we're not buying from that region unless the next farm provides something as unique to us.
Okay.
But we were finding these coffees were so unique that I couldn't get this kind of coffee in a store. And then when you go to a store, that coffee's been sitting on the shelf 6 months and it's lost that uniqueness. So your shelf life for coffee, when you put it on the store, they want you to date stamp it within a year. So
as in a best by date, not a roasted on date.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you're not, like if you go to the local grocery store, you're not going to see a roasted on date. You're going to see a best by date, which is typically 1 year to the day from the day it was roasted.
Okay.
After 30 days, coffee stops degassing, releasing the natural gases from the roasting process. That first 30 days is the peak.
Okay.
Typically, depending on the coffee, you don't want to drink it right after you roasted it. You want to wait at least 2 days. Sometimes it's a week. So realistically, coffee's best flavors and aroma is in the first, not the first week, but the 3 weeks following that.
Okay.
So that's what's important as far as getting the best flavor. Now, if you drink it 4 weeks after, 5 weeks after, it's still good coffee.
Yeah, and it's still going to be better than something that's been on the shelf for 8 months.
3 months later, I'm moving on. I've had it too long.
Yeah.
I bought too much coffee. If it's still sitting there for 3 months, you need to buy less coffee and drink it fresh. Mm-hmm. If you're buying quality coffee, drink it at its peak.
Now, how did you learn the kind? Because roasting is kind of the art form of this, right? You get these beans, and you know they've got flavor profiles of how they were, where they're from, how they were grown, whatever. The roasting is supposed to be done to kind of accentuate that stuff, right?
Yes.
So how do you learn that? How do you know if you get a Colombian, if you get a Vietnam, how to roast it? What?
So some of it's trial and error. Some of it you're playing around with. A lot of the beans have already been roasted. I mean, can't say a lot. All these beans have been roasted and profiled by a professional. So when you buy them direct from importer, there's all these profiles out there on it's going to have these notes, and you're going to kind of roast it in this general area of temperature, and these are our recommendations.
From the importer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I typically look at those profiles, and everything's online now, so that's real easy, and we'll print that page off and save it. But then we get it and play with it. And sometimes what they say I totally disagree with, and I do something different. Mm-hmm. They've said, hey, this coffee's going to have this note to it. And I'm like, I'm not getting that. So then I start playing around with it and find where's the perfect profile for me. Mm-hmm. That may not be the perfect profile for you, but if I don't like it, I'm not selling it to you.
Now, is roasting, how many variables are there? Is it just time? Is it like we always roast at 180 degrees, and then the time determines if it's a light or dark roast, or is there temperature variation? Or I don't want you to give away any trade secrets, but...
No, you're typically taking it to a certain temperature.
Okay.
There is, depending on the bean, how quickly you get to that temperature has an impact on the taste.
Okay.
So it is time and temperature. So when you're roasting coffee, it's not like a cake that you put in the oven for 30 minutes or an hour at 350.
Right.
You are applying temperature, and you continually apply temperature, bringing those beans up to the perfect temperature.
Okay.
So it's not preset at 350.
It's like a cold oven, and you're applying it and watching it and seeing how it's, okay. Right. Okay.
So you're constantly applying heat. It's not going to be totally cold because unless it's the very first roast, but so you're going to have a sort of pre-warmed roaster. The beans go in, we apply heat, and it's a certain amount of heat over a certain amount of time to get to the roast level that we want.
Right. So how did you make the jump from kind of doing this with, if you jump from your pan to your $500 roaster, when did you think, hey, maybe someone else here in the Fort Lawn area would like to try this coffee, and start kind of marketing it as it was kind of a side hustle in the beginning. It's kind of become a big hustle now.
It was so you mentioned that I'm also a home inspector. Mm-hmm. So we went through the housing crisis.
Right.
And we went from inspecting daily to, are we going to get a call this month? So when the work started picking back up, and it's like, okay, now we got to rebuild that savings account that we just wiped out. Mm-hmm. The question arose, do we just start saving again? Do we invest? Do we invest in a business that we can carry on and work out through our retirement? And that's where this kind of evolved. Mm-hmm.
You were already roasting at this time, kind of as a side project.
Yep.
So, you would have had a little more time to be learning as,
right.
as we were in 2008, 2009, right?
So going back to how did this turn into that? I'm roasting coffee, and people are like, well, can I try some of that? How come your coffee's so good? Well, here, let me give you a bag of what I roasted myself. Right. And now I've got all these people banging on my door like, where do I get my coffee? I want more coffee. I want more coffee.
Right.
And then I ran into somebody that was doing just like a farm show, and it was local, and I said, you don't even have anybody out here selling cups of coffee. She said, well, I invited a coffee roaster several times, but they just don't show up. And I thought, there's opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I really wasn't thinking long-term business opportunity.
Right.
I was being selfish and thinking, I can buy more beans.
Yeah, right. I can sell some and try something else. And
I don't have to be stuck with only the 4. I could try 8 and then bring them out here and get rid of them. Mm-hmm. And that's really where this was born, because on day one we went out there and it was gangbusters. Everyone wanted coffee.
Yeah.
So
Now, how hard? I mean, okay, you're based out of your backyard
Yep.
in Fort Lawn, and which is inspected by USDA and everything. Everyone, this isn't a shady
So-
operation. But how do you go from, okay, people that are going to like a farmer's market, that's kind of a demographic that's looking for interesting artisanal things to begin with. But still, a lot of those people probably have no idea what the difference between a Brazil and a Malabar is, and everything else. So was there an education component, or was there, people were just like, the coffee's good, I want to keep drinking it? Or how did that work as you start marketing single origin, locally roasted coffee to kind of the, Chester County crowd?
So it was this on a small scale.
Right.
It was talking to people, one client at a time. It basically is an educational system, because the average person drinking coffee doesn't even know the options you have within just the different processes, how that affects the flavor of the coffee.
Right.
So we started bringing in some more of the unique processes. We definitely brought in, so your South American coffees, we would bring in South American, Africa, Asia, but so your South American coffees have a more nutty note to it, your African coffees have a more fruity note to it, and your Indonesian coffees have a more spicy note to it. So again, people don't know this. Mm-hmm. So we bring these three things in, and we don't say, hey, this one's spicy, take it home.
Right.
We brew all three
I remember.
of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, we brew all three of those and say, we need you to taste these so you can know what you like and don't like, because most people didn't even know what they liked.
Right.
They would just go buy the same bag of coffee at the store.
Yeah.
So now they're able to taste that uniqueness from each area and go, wow, this really does stand out. I do like this better. And so then we did the same thing with the different coffee processes. So you've got your wash process, your honey process.
Now, this is the processing at the farm before
This is the stripping of the
right,
fruit.
Right.
Your washed, your natural, and your honey process. And they make a huge impact on the taste of that coffee. So again, we're going to brew all three of those. So every time we would go set up, it was an educational process. Mm-hmm. I think it probably cost us as much to do that
as you made, right? You were
it was basically let's get our name out and educate people about coffee.
Right, but then you created people like me who are little coffee minions that are then going around saying, if you haven't tried this, my favorite. Well, I don't know if I have a super favorite, but I really like the Mexico honey, and I never knew there was such a thing as a honey process, and that the beans were left with the fruit on it, and it gave it natural sweetness. And then the Ethiopian that has the blueberry, blew my mind. And the fact that I could go out and say, hey, I mean, I've always liked coffee, but at this point it'd be like, not only do I like this coffee, but there's a whole world of coffee. You can try and find whatever you want. And here's Darren that will be your guide to finding what you like. And I mean, I've gone from like, I want the Mexico to like, throw me something else, let's try everything out. And
that's exactly where I'm at. And there's things I like and things I don't like, and I have my own preferences, but it doesn't even matter if I like it. Mm-hmm. I want to try it. I want to try that unique bean. And I've had beans that we had a natural processed bean from Bali, and I like to refer to that as like the Willy Wonka of coffee, because if you recall the scene where the girl ate the chewing gum. It's supposed to be a dinner and a dessert, and it goes from the steak to the blueberry. Yeah, that blueberry cobbler or pie, and she actually turns blue and blows up. And
right.
Okay, so this coffee, and coffee the flavor notes will change as it cools. So as it's cooling in the cup, mm-hmm. what you may taste at the beginning and 15 minutes later could be different. It probably will be different. But also as it cools in your mouth and it moves across your palate, those flavors change. Mm-hmm. So this is one of those really super unique coffees that when you first drink it, you get this savory note. Mm-hmm. And it's like rosemary in your coffee, which is unusual. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that I want rosemary in my coffee.
Right.
But then as it cools and passes across the back of your palate, and it leaves you this blueberry note in your mouth. And it's like, wait a minute.
Right.
I just had a whole meal right there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I want to drink that every day? No.
Right.
Was I impressed by that? I was super impressed by that. That's something I want to have around on occasion to try myself and have other people try and go, wow, that really is an interesting
Right.
coffee.
It's funny you say that because I'm thinking about, and this is not, Darren lets me try weird stuff. And so he knows that I'm okay with it. He knows I'm going to give him an honest review. So the one that you gave me that you said you threw away, that I had the whole big bag of, right? When it's hot, it has the most savory note to it that is almost like meat. That is like, I thought there was something in my cup, right? Because I use my cup for coffee in the morning, and I switch to water in the afternoon. I don't ever put anything else in it. But I was like, maybe I didn't rinse it out, and there was some half and half left in it. There was like a noted protein, but as it cooled down, it got better, and it wasn't like it smoothed out as it cooled down. It got much more drinkable. But I mean, it was like when it was piping hot and I poured it in there, and you smell it. It was like, whoa, why does this have like this? Savory is the only way. So it's like an umami, savory flavor coming off of the coffee, which was, I mean, it's crazy. I don't want to drink that every day. Absolutely not. But was it cool to experience? I guess so. I don't know.
So at this point, we need a coffee wheel in the video.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So the coffee tasting wheel has more flavors on it than a wine tasting wheel.
Wow.
And again, most people don't know anything about coffee. And that would blow their mind to think that coffee has more flavor profiles than wine does. People know there's professional wine tasters that go to wine tastings, but coffee has more notes than wine does, and yet people are going to the store and buying the same coffee every day.
Right.
A lot of the people
I did that for years. I like think about all these years and even like, I'd known you as a home inspector for a little bit before you brought up the coffee stuff to me, and you're like, I kind of, you drink coffee is what, at the end of one inspection. I was like,
try this.
Yeah. And he's like, try this. And I was kind of like, all right, dude. I was like, what, I was thinking more like, what's this guy doing with the pan in his house? And well, first of all, I kind of, Southern lied and said I had a coffee grinder. You're like, oh, I have this whole bean, and I did have a coffee grinder, but it was broken, and I had not ordered a new one for like 6 months. And then you did another inspection for me, like, you try that coffee, and I was like, man, my grinder's been broken. But then I went home, I bought a grinder on Amazon, and ground it, and I've never gone back. If I've drunk non-White Blossom coffee at the house, it's only because I've run out, and it's an emergency. But yeah, it's incredible stuff, and like you said, the tasting notes is where it gets deep into it, and it's just it's really an awesome. I could see how this would become. I don't think you're obsessive, maybe a little bit, but at the same time, there's just so much going on. I mean, it's like you said, like with wine, you think about people that are just all about wine and doing all that stuff. To me, this is much more fun, and plus, I'd rather get the caffeine than.
Yeah, and I think. Even if you go into a coffee shop, a nice coffee shop, or a coffee shop with a roaster involved, that maybe they're roasting on site and stuff. Great places, great people, not knocking any of that.
Right.
But oftentimes you don't hear what we're talking about here today.
Right.
You're going in there because you like a dark coffee, and you're going to order whatever they have dark brewed that day.
Yeah.
And you're either going to like it or not like it. But what you're missing is there's a whole rainbow of coffees that can be roasted dark, and you might like something else better. And that's what drew me into this. As much as I say, yeah, we needed a backup plan because of the housing crisis.
Sure.
I did this because I love it. I did it because it's fun and exciting to me. There's so much adventure in trying all these coffees from around the world, and then sharing that with other people and educating other people. And as we've grown, I've kind of missed doing this aspect because I don't get to do as much one-on-one. There's so much.
I mean, I remember the first time I came down to see you at the Thames farmer market. I mean, you had they were like the little carafe pots, but there was like 15 of them set up, and so it really was more like a educational tasting. And then you had the beans roasted on the side in the little fold-over bags. But that was not what was prominent. It was the come in, try it all. Fit. And I like, too, that you're not, because I remember talking about my friend in Charleston that was like, don't put any cream in this coffee. And I think you have to ride the line here when you're coming from people that have been, I go to the store and I always buy 8 o'clock coffee or whatever, and I drink it like this every day and I always have. You can't make the jump to blueberry coffee black, right? So, I mean, you encourage people, fix it how you want it. You had everything there, and it was like, let's just get in and see where you're at.
And I think that's where other coffee people are coming off the wrong way, saying,
Right.
well, you got to have it black. You're not a purist if you don't have it black.
Right.
If you try coffee, if you drink coffee every day with sugar or cream or both, and then you just have a black cup of coffee, you're not going to like it. So why would you want to put something unique in front of somebody and say, hey, this is the best you're going to get, but you got to drink it black, and then they're not going to like it?
Right.
Fix it the way you fix it at home. If you want to dial back the cream or sugar over time so you can experience more of the pure coffee profile, that's fine.
Right.
But you've got to drink it the way you're used to drinking it. And putting cream and sugar, not flavored cream,
Right.
but just putting cream and sugar in your coffee is not going to affect that profile much.
Right.
You're still going to get those nuanced flavors coming out of that bean, which
Yeah.
that's why we're doing this, to get those nuanced flavors. And so I'm being very clear. Do not put French vanilla in that coffee and expect to get those blueberry notes.
Right. Yeah. Don't put your peppermint mocha
Yeah.
coffee mate in there and be like, I don't know, I didn't really get any of that rosemary flavor.
Yeah, that is not going to work. But yeah, you need to drink the coffee the way you would enjoy the coffee. And cream and sugar is fine, or one or the other. Either, as long as you're not adding flavors to that coffee, you're going to experience those nuanced flavors from that bean, from the processing, the origin, and that's what's important.
Yeah. So tell me, as you've built this community of coffee minions, I don't know if you have a name for it, coffee snobs, I guess is what it says on the back of our shirts, right?
Yeah.
But, what has been like the most fun part of that? I mean, has it been worth it to you to do? Do you feel like you're kind of fighting uphill sometimes educating people, or has it been like, have you enjoyed that aspect? Has the community received what you're trying to do?
I've definitely enjoyed it, but it is an uphill fight because people are so stuck in, but this is what I like. And if I can speak to them and say, we've got this new thing, oh, let's get some of that.
Right.
But if I don't have communication with them and they just go on the website and order,
right,
it's exactly what they ordered last time.
Yep.
So,
which you're okay with, right? I mean, that keeps the roaster rolling.
It keeps the business going, which means I can keep moving forward, and there's people I can communicate and educate, and maybe doing things like this will help. That truly is my passion, is those unique flavors from processing origin. But what's interesting is, and we just did this yesterday, released our latest flavor for March, which is Irish cream coffee, and we're calling it the Irishman. And
you're good.
But just putting those, so the flavors on their own draw a unique crowd, and I don't like flavors. I have to have people help me taste the coffees as I'm making those flavor profiles, because I really do not like flavor in my coffee.
And how do you, when you have a flavor, you roast the beans and then you pour something on top, or how's that work?
So it's either an oil infused bean, where we're grinding the beans, now blending the beans in with our unflavored beans and then grinding it down. Now they're super infused, or the oil direct that gets applied to the beans.
Before or after roasting, or they're roasted in?
Everything's after.
Everything's after.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're how much of the flavor are we combining flavors? There's all these variables in getting that flavor right to where the public likes it. But I find that here I throw this advertisement out, hey, our March release is out there, and all of a sudden, bam, we get hit with all these orders. And it's not for the flavor.
Right.
It's all the people that want those single origin coffees, saw the flavor and went, oh, let me check this out. And they end up on the site and buying all these unique coffees. We do definitely have a following for the flavors now. So the flavors have definitely
it's just, I feel like it's, to me, coffee is kind of like cars. There's people that buy the Honda and they drive it forever, and they know that's what it is, and it works for them, and it gets them from point A to point B. And then you've got, the weirdos like me that are like, oh, let me get a weird old car that no one makes parts for anymore, but it's got this awesome it's got this awesome profile and this awesome history, and I'm, and doing everything else. So it's like, you get into it as deep as you want, but I think you do a great job of a middle ground of like, why don't you look over here and maybe check this out, But the flavors are obviously going to bring people in because it's like there's some people that use coffee as a tool that don't like coffee, but they drink coffee because they need it to wake up in the morning, and that's what they're going to do, and that's what they're always going to do. And
if we're adding this flavor to it, and it keeps them from having to stop at a coffee shop to get that crazy flavored coffee that they're paying $6 a cup for, that's a heck of a lot cheaper to get the flavor. And the flavors we're doing are more unique. It's not just vanilla, or chocolate. It's
hazelnut or whatever.
So we're doing some very unique flavors, and it's something that it's rather new to us, because to me that's that truck that you bought and put 20-inch rims on and jacked up the front and lowered the back and put a crazy.
No one wants that coffee.
That's what I mean. My thinking was, I don't want that in my coffee.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that do.
Right.
And then there's also people that they want the flavor. They don't want all the sugar. Mm-hmm. None of our flavors have sugar, no sweetener in it whatsoever. It's just flavor.
Right.
And we can also do that in the decaf. And it's hard to get decaf flavored coffee, especially the unique flavors that we're doing. So I'm finding there's a whole nother crowd of people out there that we can provide coffee to with a whole nother unique line that I'm really enjoying watching this line expand.
That's cool. I can't remember what I was going to say here, but I had something.
Delete, edit,
crop this out. But I great stuff. Tell us where we can find it. Tell us how to get to you. And, if you want to try something, what would be do you put a recommendation if someone comes to you and say, hey, that's what I was going to say. What about your people that are like, I have a Breville machine. I drink espresso every day. I do 2 shots, put it on ice with cream, and that's what I do. Do you have people like that you're converting to like have the hot coffee and see, or education-wise, how specifically tuned is it? And do you have like a base plate that says, this is where the kind of baseline is, if you try this Brazil and we can kind of go from there? Or do you super seg it into people what they tell you?
I always try to start people where they're at.
Okay.
So if someone says, well, what do you recommend? My first question is, what are you drinking? Mm-hmm. Now, if you say Folgers Instant, I'm going to tell you to go to Walmart.
Isn't there kind of like an instant coffee revolution happening right now where people are like saying it's decent again or something?
Yeah.
Is that all hype? I don't know.
They're stuck on their Keurigs right now.
Yeah, Keurigs are just. Yeah, I've never liked Keurigs. I mean, it's never.
It's a convenience.
That's Lee Hamilton. Lee Hamilton loves your coffee and drink it every chance he gets. But that man is drinking 6 Keurig pods a day. I'm like, is it just your body must just be all day long? Because I'm like a 3-cup in the morning person, and then I'm done. I might get one in the afternoon depending on how froggy I'm feeling. But
you can get quality coffee or you can get quick coffee. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get quick quality.
I guess that's right. I guess it's like.
So I'm anti-Keurig because I'm more involved, more impassioned about the quality. There's nothing quick about coffee. I enjoy my coffee.
Yeah.
And when I get that hot cup in front of me, I know that I'm going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes enjoying that. And I don't want to do that in 30 seconds. Because if I do it in 30 seconds, I don't even care what's in the cup. At that point, it's just caffeine and it's hot.
Yeah.
And I'm not even paying attention.
Right. But, so there is like a whole, and I see that we were talking about TikTok trends or whatever this morning in the meeting, but there's this whole side of TikTok that's about like this incredible ritual of grinding the beans, having them out, putting filters in the espresso press, using the little rake. What do you recommend to someone that's like, I got my Mr. Coffee? Do you say, for the next step for you would be go whole bean and grind it up and just make it in that thing?
So let's back up to the other question we didn't answer, which is where do you start with people in the recommendation?
Oh,
First question is, what are you drinking at home? And then based on that answer, I make a suggestion. If you like dark coffee, I'm going to suggest a dark coffee to you. And then I do get that question. Well, how do I make it that good? How do I make it the best it can be. Number one is get a good grinder. It is not the coffee pot; it's the grinder. If you've got just a blade, well, first of all, if you're buying ground coffee, and people buy my coffee and ask for it to be pre-ground before I.
That stabs you in the heart a little bit, doesn't it? Yeah.
Because
but you got to do it. You got to meet people where you're at, like you said.
Coffee loses 50% of its aroma in like 15 minutes.
Wow.
And aroma is half of the experience when you're consuming something. So it's like, why would you want something and buy a premium product only to lose half of that experience because you had it ground when you can go buy your own grinder? So having any grinder is better than no grinder. You can go to Walmart and spend $20 on a little spice grinder with blades in it that'll chop it up. Now, that is not the best grinder in the world, but it's better than having your coffee pre-ground.
Okay.
So that would be my number one is get a grinder. It will change the experience in your coffee cup. Number two would be, I guess it depends on how cheap is the machine you're using.
I was going to say, yeah.
Because number two could be caught between upgrade your machine or upgrade your grinder. So that blade grinder is going to break it up into pieces, but it's not consistently sized pieces. You're going to get some tiny little dust-like particles and then some big chunks. And what happens is the big chunks under-extract the coffee, which makes it very light.
Right.
Those tiny flakes, pieces, will over-extract, and then you get bitterness in your coffee. So a good burr grinder will change that and give you a consistent grind. And there are people out there that make coffee grind filters, and you can filter out all the little super fines or the super. You don't have to do all that. You're unless you're a like super bionic palate, you're never gonna taste that.
Right.
There's
That's
probably
my thing
somebody
too.
out there that will, but you look. Your sense of taste and smell is like every other sense in your body. People don't all see the same. Some of us have to wear glasses. Some of us have to wear goggles and bifocals, and it's like your palate's the same.
Right.
So there's probably people out there that just don't care about food because their palate's so bad they can't taste it.
Right.
And then there's people out there that are super sensitive and they're getting every bit of that last bit.
Right.
The average person's not that. A good grinder, a good coffee machine, or a good manual like a pour over or a French press is all you need. If you're using a really low-end coffee maker, probably upgrading that coffee maker before the grinder would be important because coffee is very temperature sensitive. And if you don't buy a quality coffee maker, they tend on using cheap components inside.
Right.
And so you're either overheating or underheating. That the temperature may not even be consistent.
Right.
And your coffee's not going to taste good. And you don't even know it because you just bought a coffee maker thinking it's going to work, and you're like, "Well, this coffee's terrible." No, your coffee maker's terrible. So, good grinder, good coffee maker. Look at some reviews. You got to start with good coffee. You got to start with good coffee.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to spend a fortune, some of these coffee makers are $150, $500. You can go buy a French press for $20.
Right.
You put water. Again, you would want to, if you're doing it manually without a kettle that you could set a temperature on, my rule of thumb is bring it to a boil, turn it off. When the water stops bubbling, and then you start pouring it in, because then you're bringing it back off to about 205.
Right.
Which is where 195 to 205 is where your
sweet spot.
Your sweet spot, yeah. So by the time you start pouring that, and then you're off the heat already, it's going to drop, and by the time you're done, you're
substantially as you start pouring it. Yeah. Cool. Well, where can we find you, and how do we get these beans?
I'm right here.
Yeah. Right here on your screen.
WhiteBlossomCoffee.com.
All right. What do we have here? What is in this mystery black?
That is the mystery coffee. So we have an Ethiopian natural Guji right here. This is the one he was talking about that has the blueberry notes in it. And we have the honey processed here. WhiteBlossomCoffee.com. It's a flat $6 shipping. If you are local and you want to come down, we have pickup boxes where you can pick it up there. We do not have a retail store because we have other work that we're doing. And if we're in there roasting coffee, we don't have staff selling coffee. We
Right.
need to be working on what we're doing, not chit-chatting.
Right.
So if you order online and wanted to come down and pick it up, there's pickup boxes, and we pretty much roast everything fresh. And so if you order today, you may not get it today. It may be tomorrow or the next day
Right.
if we don't have it ready. So then we put it in the box and we just send an email saying, hey, your order's ready to pick up. If you put an order in online and just say ship it, it's $6 flat rate. As soon
No
as the
matter how
order's
much you
done,
order.
Doesn't matter what you order.
Dang.
Throw it in a box and away we go.
You got auto ship? Because that might be what I need.
There are subscriptions on there.
Okay.
The subscriptions, there's a light coffee, a dark coffee, a medium coffee.
And that rotates?
And that's we have some stock things that we keep in stock that we always throw something standard in there. But as we get unique things in, we try to throw one of those in there.
Kind of like coffee of a month thing.
Right.
Cool.
So typically those are a 3-pack. So you'll probably get 2 of something we've had, and whatever we just got in, that's going in there also. But with roughly 30 single origins in our shop,
Yeah.
your box is going to look different every month.
Right.
So even if it's something we got on the shelf, now 6 months down the road, you might hit a duplicate, but yeah.
And what's your average price per? Do you sell? Are these pounds or 14 ounces?
So those are 12 ounces
ounce,
for
yeah.
$14.
Okay.
That's the starting price. Depends on what you're looking for. We do have some premium coffees. We have like a coffee from Yemen. I think that one goes for 17 for 12 ounces. Everything that we do, and I'm going to say this because all coffee is not produced at the same cost.
Mm-hmm.
Coffee comes from third world nations around the world. So when you're ordering, and even these as an example, so here's Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a poor country. Here's Mexico. Mexico is a poor country. Not as poor as Ethiopia, but it's also a poor country.
Right.
Number 1 coffee producing nation in the world is Brazil, very poor country. So that means there's slave labor. There is, they exploit the labor. They underpay them. They don't provide medical care. They have child labor. It's prevalent everywhere coffee is produced. We have these issues. So you can go get really cheap coffee.
Yeah.
But you got to understand what went into producing that coffee.
Right.
And we would refuse to buy from those people. So we check out all the farms we check out all the farms we're producing, that we're purchasing from. Let me say that again.
That's right. Yeah.
We check out all those farms that we're purchasing from to make sure the background. And the majority of them, there's a lot of farms out there that really do a fantastic job of taking care of the farmers, the children's, providing schools for the children to go to, medical centers on site, fair wages. A lot of that is not documented when we get into certified organic, certified fair trade.
Right.
There's like a 5% inspection process. There's thousands of these farms. 5% doesn't do justice. And a lot of the smaller farms we're buying from can't even afford those processes because you got to pay for all that to be done.
Right.
So having people that can go on site and inspect the farms is far more important to me than having some certification that
It's organic or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we really spend a lot of time researching where we're getting our coffee from. Not to say other roasters don't. To me, that's a very important part of what we're doing. I have kids. I would not want my kids treated the way some of these kids are in these third world countries. Now, keeping that in mind, when I say they've got a school or medical facilities, we're still in Africa. We're still in Brazil.
Right.
It's not, you're not going to walk into what looks like your local hospital here.
Right.
But at least that effort is being made and people are being taken care of and looked out for.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on today, man. This was
You're
fun.
welcome.
We learned a lot. I mean, I knew a lot of this, but I also learned a lot. That's great. So yeah, check it out, whiteblossomcoffee.com. Darren will put it in a box for you. He'll ship it to your house. Join the subscription if you want. But like I said, this stuff is top notch. Darren, it's always great talking to you about coffee. Thanks for coming.